Was this would be better? Alright. Yeah, let's compromise on 5 seconds.
Hey, welcome back, viewers. It is I, James Kalm, your half-assed reporter, the guy on the bike. And we are at the bottom end of Soho, and we're gonna run into the Peter Freeman Gallery and take a look at a Myron Stout show. Stay tuned. And the title of the show is Myron Stout Charcoal Drawings. Well, I was in here yesterday, so due to some technical difficulties, I lost my recording, but I'm back. So all of these pieces, or most of them, are untitled. And charcoal on paper. I think almost all of them are 25 by 19 inches. And I think only maybe 4 or 5 of them are dated. So this is not dated, not titled. I was just talking to the gallerist, and well, I was curious about how they found this cache of well-preserved, beautifully executed work. So this is untitled, and one of the things they were talking about is that these are works that were done by Myron when he was studying at the Hans Hofmann school, I guess probably in the late 40s, early 50s. And, well, the gallerist said that they found these in a box in his studio. At least his family found them. And I guess that Myron never intended them to be publicly displayed, at least in his lifetime. This kind of looks like a landscape. The other thing that's notable is that as we go through here, you can sort of see the stylistic evolution of Myron's practice as he goes from works like this, which are, I would say this looks a lot like many of the students that studied with Hans Hofmann, Lee Krasner, Larry Rivers, people like that. And as he moves along, he becomes more and more kind of a proto-minimalist. Again, I was saying they were like well preserved. This looks so fresh. Also untitled, no date. Okay, they're saying that Myron was a Texan from Denton, Texas. I believe he was born in 1908. And, well, I'm going to try to get up to the Upper East Side, and we'll paste this exhibition recording together with a show up there by another Texan, Forrest Bess, who was maybe only about 4 years older than Myron Stout. I don't like the cubism. I was going to say one of the things that, or one of the terms that people talk about with Hans Hofmann and his teaching technique was his push and pull. So kind of using dynamic graphic elements, he was kind of encouraged his students to use positive and negative space to make some kind of a pictorial tension. Oh God, these are very finely drawn. Myron had a very delicate hand. Okay, see, now we start to see more of a development of the formalistic aspect of the works. He's getting into just straight geometric abstraction. Also, some of these are a little looser, some of them are tighter. And, gosh, I guess some of his white lines are actually erasures. I know that Myron Stout and Forrest Bess are a couple of the kind of guru shamanistic artists that a lot of people in the Williamsburg art scene admire and have been influenced by. I think one of the aspects that people admire about Myron's work is that some of his later pieces he was said to have worked on for years, sometimes decades. Okay, here we go. This is one of the, I think, kind of transitional pieces where it really gets into just the black and the white. So we've got a grid kind of like a still Mondrian, except there's a little warp in your grid. Okay, here's the first one that we've got that's been dated. This is 1952. And you can see that there's a lot of reworking, a lot of erasure, and maybe refining his placement of the lines. Oh, this is a beautiful piece. Untitled, but it is dated 1950. Okay, I like this one because you really get a chance to see him grinding in his charcoal. And he's using geometric forms, but he's kind of laying them out in a haphazard, spontaneous way. And you got a couple of little erasures. Untitled, no date. But I would assume this is probably around 1950. And I also would say that Myron was part of a paradigm shift. There were 5 or 6 other artists that were active in the scene downtown that were sort of going towards a more minimalist approach. I think Ellsworth Kelly would be one of them. Agnes Barton was down here. A lot of them were down at the Quinty Slip neighborhood. Okay, so that's a beautiful piece too, and really decided that he wanted to grind in those dark areas. And I like the way that he is handling the edges here. So we got the points of the triangles hitting the edge of the paper. Positive against negative, black against white. It is interesting that he kind of wants to distill everything down to the black and whites and the very bold designs, but then he's got these little shadows that he's floating in there, very subtle. This is one of my favorite pieces. I got some little smudges in there, just enough to let you know that it was created by a human hand. Oh, and they don't quite touch. Gosh. It's left a little space between those 2 points. It's also one of the dated pieces. This is 1950. I would also be interested to know how much erasure was involved in this. Did he, well, here's a good example. You see his kind of checkerboard patterns. But then there's a lot of drawing that he's left in there, kind of underdrawing. Also, that little section between the two black spaces, my old teacher at the art students, like Knox Martin, referred to that as your passage. And unless you take some time, you'll never pick up on that. This is 1951. Okay, so these are actually kind of arced. $1949. Well, I was talking about his passage and the blocks of the dark colors, and then we've got this very delicate white line. And it looks like there was some erasure going on there. No date. Yeah, he's a master of the tiny detail, the strange little quirks, warps. And for some reason this paper seems a little more creamy toned, more of an ivory white. Okay, this is also one of my favorite pieces in the show. Not dated. Okay, so I was talking about his little details. This white form on top here with the little tail that comes out on one side. And then you've got a black stripe that comes down and rejoins that. And then you've got almost like a mirror image of that white shape flipped over on the bottom. $1950. Oh, again, we've got our little tiny white stripes. But here we've also got a couple of lines that he's left, and in a certain way it kind of makes you imply or think what that white form would look like if he'd filled in these black spaces on those other lines. No date. Well, I was talking about the way that these drawings were found in a box in the studio, and that Myron had no intention of exhibiting them, at least during his life. But I have to think that, well, he wouldn't take such good care of them if you just thought you were going to throw them in a dumpster or burn them. Okay, and now I think we're getting to a couple of the most minimal of the minimal. Okay, so you've almost got like two perfect black rectangles, except that they're slightly angled. Narrower at the bottom than at the top. And here's kind of the reverse version of that. Jame Kalm reporting on Myron Stout Charcoal Drawings here at the Peter Freeman Gallery. We're gonna roll on. Okay, gang, we're gonna run up to the Upper East Side to take a look at a Forrest Bess show at the Franklin Parrasch Gallery on 66th Street, and the title of the show is Jack Was My First Art Collector. Forrest Bess from the estate of Jack Weinberg. Okay, hang on. Okay, well, this is permit number 13, 1946. I just pedaled up here to the Upper East Side from Soho, and we were just looking at a Myron Stout show, and well, I wanted to make sure I got up to see the Forrest Bess show. The show is closing tomorrow. Mostly these are small paintings. This is 7.5 by 9.5 inches. Oil on canvas, and this is dated 1946, which is actually also interesting because that kind of parallels the Myron Stout work as well. Although I think they're saying that these works were right at the beginning of the period when Forrest Bess started to produce his kind of mystical paintings, his abstract paintings. Untitled 1946, Oil on Wood. John Yao makes a point of saying that all of the paintings in this show, except for two of the last paintings we'll see, are very small and not quite as interesting, although I think this is a good one. This is Untitled 1946, and they're all about the size of a postcard. The first couple of pieces we saw are pretty naturalistic. We saw a little harlequin and some still lifes. This Forrest is actually getting into some of the images and devices that he used later. Also, John made a point of saying that although they are tiny, there's a certain kind of physicality. The way that Forrest Bess was painting on them and then scraping into the paint. Also untitled, 1946, 4 by 5 inches, and then the frame makes it 10 by 12. So Forrest Bess was a Texan. I think we're saying that Myron Stout was from Denton, and I think Forrest Bess was somewhere on the coast, maybe Brownsville, and he spent much of his life living on a little island, kind of off the coast, running a kind of a bait and tackle shop. So he spent a lot of time by himself. Also untitled, but you get to see his little signature scratched in there. I've always been fascinated with the story of Forrest Bess and John Yale makes a big point of this in his article. Forrest Bess' ideas about alchemy, sexuality, gender, and at some point he actually performed, well, there's varying stories, but he performed self-surgery trying to turn himself into a morphodite, or somehow unifying his sexual identities. Also untitled. Now this is kind of strange. We've got a little, I call it a Greek key, and also this one is kind of highly colored. Anyway, Forrest Bess was also in contact with some New York people. I know that he was friends with Meyer Shapiro, and as you may know, I'm a good friend of Fong Bui, and Fong was kind of a close friend, but also was mentored by Meyer Shapiro and got to meet a lot of the New York intellectuals, the West Village intellectuals from Meyer's circle. And Meyer actually gave Fong a painting, a Forrest Bess painting. This is 1946. 13.5 by 15.5. I like that. Some of it's very rugged and a lot of unpainted canvas. Other parts it's kind of worked in, buffed in. Somehow there's a little Picasso in there. I think Forrest Bess is also such a well-known, recognized, almost the shaman of modern painting that, 2 or 3 years ago, a guy, I believe his name was Richard Hawkins, did a whole series of kind of riffs on famous Forrest Bess paintings. You can go online, I've got the program, and I kind of jazzed up some of it, but it kind of shows you the power that an artist like Forrest Bess would exert decades after his death. Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to come in and see this show is that about, I guess it's 12 years ago now, that there's this British gallery called Haunch of Venison curated a Forrest Bess show, and at the time it was the largest Forrest Bess exhibition that they'd ever held. It was in the one of the Rockefeller Center towers, and I got up and made the recording. I think they had something like 45 paintings in the show. And running simultaneously was a Whitney Biennial, and Robert Gober had curated a whole room of Forrest Bess works, and I think they had about 12 or 14 of those. So at this point, I've probably videoed and put more Forrest Bess paintings online than anybody else in the world. And I had to keep my streak going. I think this is also a good example of he finally is shifting into a totally unique, he called himself a mystical painter, but it is a kind of strange, symbolic abstraction. Jame Kalm reporting on. Jack was my first collector. The works of Forrest Bess. Here at the Franklin Parrasch Gallery on the Upper East Side. You can like this, share, link it up to all your social media sites. You can talk about it, and you can leave your thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, and reviews below. And again, for 19 years, we're just asking you to say thank you, Kate.